Okay. So, hello everyone, and let me introduce my guest for today's podcast. His name is Keegan, and Keegan is an executive leadership and performance coach. He helps executive and athletes remove distractions that hinder their performance so that they can achieve more with the potential they already possess. Glad to have you here, man.
I appreciate it, Ankit. This is going to be a ton of fun.
Amazing. So, I've been looking at your website and I've gone through that PDF document. I think it's called Momentum, Create Momentum,
Yep.
and it had some really nice actionable step. And I've been looking at your journey through your about page, and it was really interesting for me. Like you went from being athlete to working in creative field and marketing, and then now you're doing coaching executives. So how did this transition happen?
It was a long process and it was not a fun process. I will be honest about that up front. So my background, I've been an athlete really my entire life, but from a formal perspective, I was an American football player for the University of Colorado from 2011 through 2014. And when I realized that my football career was probably going to end in college, I wanted to make the decision of, you know what, like maybe I start looking into other stuff. And then as I was getting towards the end of my career, I actually didn't play my senior season, my senior year of college, because I ran out of money. I couldn't afford to play football anymore. I couldn't afford rent. I had to get out of my apartment that was on campus. I couldn't afford to continue to play football because you can't hold a job because of the demands of all of it. And I had to move back home. And I had to figure out how to continue to move forward. So my football career was ended in a not so high note. And it was tough. It was really tough because you go from being an athlete and the camaraderie of all of it, the relationship with all your coaches and all this other stuff, like every single part of your life that you have worked on year after year, that has created the person that you are, just gets seemingly cut off immediately. So I faced a ton of identity loss. I didn't know what I was supposed to do, who I was supposed to be, if anything was supposed to change. All I know is, I mean, the first day after I couldn't, like I stopped. I remember waking up at a normal time. Like I remember waking up at like 7:30 in the morning and I was just like, I feel like I've slept in an extra 12 hours because ever since I could remember, I had been up between 4 and 5 a.m., getting ready to go and do workouts and all this other stuff. And so obviously there was a bit of relief there, right? Like I was like, I'm getting more sleep. I'm able to do more. I have more time throughout the day. I can have a life, but I didn't know what to do with that. And so I tried to find answers. I tried to figure out what I was supposed to do. And everybody told me, hey, you need to go and do this. You need to go get an internship here. You need to go get a job. You need to go do all these other things. So I did all of that. And, I wound up getting internships, having jobs, finishing up college. And I finished college and didn't have a job lined up. So I graduated, and once again, like it wasn't for a lack of trying. I tried with dozens of companies to try and set myself up, but I had nothing lined up. So I was part of the 2% of my graduating class that didn't have a job. Even though I was a tutor, I had pretty good grades. I was a high achieving individual. I had great relationships with tons of people. It's just not the way it worked out for me. I wound up eventually getting a job, and it was the only offer, or the first offer that came in. I just took it and found myself not being able to hold a job for a number of different reasons, whether it was the company was struggling and they had to do layoffs, or another place, it just was not a good fit whatsoever. And they recognized that just as much as I did. Or I was scrambling and tried to find consulting work or like self-employed kind of stuff. it was really just this stretch of like 4 to 5 years of just complete uncertainty of what I was going to do. And I had, I don't know, I want to say 5 jobs in 5 years type of thing.
Yeah.
And when I finally when I was working this job here in Denver, Colorado, out here in the States, I was driving to work and I was, kind of talking to myself in my head, and I wound up feeling like I was going to throw up. Like I started getting sick to my stomach, and I felt like I was going to get sick, like I was going to have to pull over the car and stuff. And so I did. I was in traffic and I pulled over and I was like, I'm going to be sick. And what came out was this, like, I didn't get sick, but I wound up saying out loud to myself, what am I doing? Like I was so sick to my stomach physically because of something that was going on mentally that I actually had a verbal reaction to it, which has never happened to me before. Not once, where I felt like I was going to be sick and something, and I said something. Never happened to me before. So that was really kind of one of my mental lowest points in my entire life. And at that point, I knew I was so incredibly far away from the person who I thought I was going to be. And that I knew I could be, that something had to change. And I knew I was the only person who could do it. I immediately that day started reaching out to people who I thought were very successful. Some of them were CEOs, some of them were entrepreneurs, some of them were just friends who I thought were, I even saw them on social media, like posting all these highlights and stuff. I was like, this person seems like they have it all together. And I just talked to them. I just wanted to understand how they operated. So if there was just something, a tiny minuscule sliver of strategy that I could take from them and put into my own world, that I wanted to do that. So I wanted to figure them out. And by having these conversations and being hyper curious about them as an individual, I had heard from them during those conversations. It was 3 conversations in 3 days. I had more than that, but these 3 particular conversations happened on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And in each one of those conversations, the person who I was talking to said, have you ever thought of becoming a coach? And I asked, I said, no, why do you say that? And they said, what you're doing right now is helping me. And you don't, and you think that you're trying to dig to find something for you, but you're helping me. And this is a lot of what a coach does. They ask these amazing questions at really good times. Yeah. And so you don't even realize that you're doing this. And so I was curious if you are a coach or if you ever thought of being one, because I paid a guy a ton of money to do exactly what you're doing. So I had no clue that I was doing that. And I reached out to a family friend who was an executive coach, and I brought it up to him, and he said that he was never going to bring this up to me, but he thinks I would be an awesome coach, and that if I was ever curious about it, that I should just ask him. So that's exactly what I did. I talked to him and I said, what has to happen? I don't understand any of this stuff. I'm not Tony Robbins here. Like I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. And that's when he introduced me to the concept that coaching was not just for these executive elites and stuff like that, but they're really for just anybody, right? You can help anybody do anything and coach them around any subject, as long as you have a really great framework and you have a really great approach to all these things. So I spent a year after that point getting certified as a coach. Long process. It was somewhere around like $12,000, $15,000 of an investment, which I didn't have, right? Becoming a coach relied on my ability to position something as a value add. The company I was working with,
I think you got frozen in between. So can you try back 3 seconds? Because
no, you're fine. And it was it's recording on my side. So I think as long as I'm getting myself, so I'll recap that really quickly. Sure. So I was, so when I looked into coaching, like the whole concept of coaching wouldn't have even happened if, like, I think it was very much divine intervention. I'm a religious person, and this was one of those moments where it affirmed my belief that something more powerful is absolutely at play. So me becoming a coach relied on my ability to position something as a value add rather than trying to ask for something. Instead, provide value to somebody else and then see what happens then. So the company I had been working for had a continuing education program. It was mainly for college, where if you went there, they would cover, I think, 50% of tuition costs every calendar year. So I put together this this 5-slide PowerPoint with all these different things about how coaching can help the workplace and do all these different things. And it's great for continuing education. It makes you better at your work and all this other stuff. And I took it to HR for the company that I had been working with. I got one slide in, and the lady looks at me and says, "We're getting rid of this rule next week. If you want us to grandfather you in, we can sign the document, because I think, based off of this, I'm going to immediately say, I'm getting ready to leave the company. I could care less. And if you just want to sign the thing, that's totally fine. And if you leave the company voluntarily, you have to pay all of it back. But if you don't leave the company voluntarily, then you don't have to pay any of it back." So because this woman was leaving in like 3 weeks, this rule that they had for continuing education not having to be strictly for like a university education, like that was leaving in a week. So timing couldn't have been, I didn't know this, right? Timing couldn't have been more perfect. And she was just like, "I'll go get the piece of paper right now." And so I got one slide in, and I immediately shut my computer. I was like, "Yep, let's do it." So she brought it over and I signed it, and I wound up getting let go by the company later on, which that's a whole nother story that we can save for another time. I wound up getting let go, so I didn't have to pay any of that back. So I got my coaching certification paid for because I didn't have the money. Like my bank account at the time had like $1,500 in it. And so I didn't have the money to pay for any portion of getting a coaching certificate, but I had put it in a place where what I had said and everything being what it was, I wound up being able to have it paid for, and it was nothing short of divine intervention. And I was just like, "Thank you, God, for allowing this to happen." So that's how I got it funded. Now, obviously, I had to do all the work, and I had to put in all of the effort and all this other stuff. But I wound up becoming a coach, and that happened about 5 years ago, a little over 5 years ago, when I finally became a coach, and I decided to start my own practice, and then began this whole journey of, who I would serve, how I would serve them, and niching and all that other stuff like that. So it was a wild ride, and honestly still is.
Yeah,
It's been an absolute journey.
amazing. It is inspiring, I can say. And in the retrospect, do you think back that if you could change one thing, do you think like that if this would happen, my life would be at a certain place? Because I do a lot that if this would happen, I would be there and I would be there. So do you think
Yeah.
about that, or it's just connecting the dots?
It's a great question, because I think everybody does it.
Mhm.
If I would have known what I know now back then, right? It's that whole concept of um saying, "Oh, like, what if I had just invested in this one thing? I would be a
Mhm.
multimillionaire. If I had only known this back then, my life would be changed." I used to think that a ton, right? I used to think all the time, especially as an athlete. You'd be looking at game film, you'd be looking at even your practice. If I had just done this one thing differently, I would have performed better. But there's this I want to say this, not necessarily, it's not like a cardinal rule, but I think of it as a little bit of a cardinal rule that powerful individuals or people who perform at a really high level don't take the time to dwell on the past. They understand that what is, and the only thing you can do is make the next best decision, which is just a decision using all the information you currently have right now with the best of intentions. That's the only thing that we are capable of doing, because when you dwell on the past, I also cannot remember a time where it has ever served me intentionally. Like, it's never been a positive experience looking in the past and thinking, oh, I could have done this differently. There's not one time, and I dare anybody to challenge me when they think about the past and wanting to do something differently, if it ever actually made a positive difference in your life, wanting to change, what you did.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it doesn't make any difference. And I think you are the first person who has been a pro athlete, I can say, and I know you. So it's been really interesting. I've never played any sport, and recently I've been going to gym. So this is, I think, my first physical activity, I can say. So what lessons did you learn as the pro athlete, which are helping you now, and which you think that every person should learn and include in their life?
Yeah. This is another awesome question, because being an athlete and then having crossed the chasm into kind of the more professional realm, there's one main thing that I've learned is that they're both the same, right? They both require you to perform at a high level, right?
Mhm.
You're going to the gym for the, as a general newcomer, we'll call it,
Yeah.
right? You're early in your process for this. When you're early in the process, you look around the gym and you see people who are super fit and all this other stuff, and it probably makes you feel, like you're this big, and you're like,
Mhm.
what am I doing here? I'm not lifting as much weights as them. I don't look like them. I'm not this, I'm not that, and then you feel the sense of anxiety, and some stress and all this other fun stuff. And you're just like, what am I doing here? Which feeds into a bit of imposter syndrome. Why am I even here?
Yeah.
Should I even be here? Am I worth being here? Is this membership worth paying? When it comes to sports, you feel the exact same thing, right? When you first start a sport, or when you go from high school to college, you feel all those exact same emotions. Same thing goes on with business. When you start a new job, you're leaving a job that you have a ton of experience with to go into something new that feels brand new, and you're like
Mhm.
a spring chicken with that, and you feel all these different emotions and all these different feelings, and you start to question yourself all the time. It happens. We all go through it. But the one thing that helps you overcome it is to just take action. The number one way to get over your fear of being at the gym is to go to the gym. The
Yeah.
number one, the thing that helps you get over the fear of, public speaking or being good at your job or providing value to your clients is to step up to the plate and take swings. It's just to do something. And for some people, that's asking a lot. There's plenty of times where someone says, I don't know. I'm too crippled to be able to do that. And it's because you haven't yet understood the threshold of leverage. And the threshold of leverage is doing, like, what is the bare minimum something has to be in order for you to feel stimulated enough to actually take action with it, right? When you think about a kid, when a mom says, hey, take your laundry and put it in the laundry room, and the kid doesn't do it. And so the mom says, if I have to ask you again, I'm going to whoop your ass, right? And suddenly the kid is like, this is now stimulating enough for me to go and do something. Now, obviously, that's you want to avoid pain situation. But if the mom said, hey, if you do your chores, we'll go and do XYZ, then that is, you're doing something in the leverage of wanting to receive pleasure in your life, right? You're going to go do something that you enjoy. So when it comes to overcoming that, the fear, anxiety, the stress, all that other stuff, to whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's sports, whether it's business, anything that requires performance, you to actually take action in order to get a result. In order to overcome that initial barrier, you have to understand how you incentivize yourself enough to be able to just do something. I mean, who is it? Gary Vaynerchuk says post 4 times on TikTok, and people are like, oh my gosh, that's so much. And he's like, just post 4 meaningful things on TikTok a day and you will grow exponentially. And it's not that he's wrong. He's absolutely right. You go on there, and if you post 4 times a day, you'll blow up. It's that people start to overcomplicate it, and it's not enough leverage for them to actually go and do it. There's too much pain for them to want to try and endure to get to the other side of potential pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
So people have to start peeling back. Okay, what is the minimum threshold? What's easy enough for me to actually take a step? How do I take a first step? What's something simple for me to do? And a lot of times he will say, just pick up your phone, look into the camera, say something meaningful. It's easy enough, but some people still don't do that. They need to understand what they do. And sometimes, and this comes into the coaching realm, the stuff that I do, it's about clearing out the clutter. People have so much stuff going on in their head. And sometimes it's about asking a question, right? What is something that's mundane to you, right? If I asked you with your business, hey, what's your bread and butter? Let's play this out really quickly. What's your bread and butter to your business? Like the lowest hanging fruit thing that someone could ask you to do.
I think it would be designing a brand identity. So simply a logo.
Beautiful. Designing a logo. Now, when it comes to making a logo, do you have a general, like, hey, here's some fundamental things I'm going to want to make sure I do? Like, do you have a process to it or anything like that?
So it would be like first simple discovery call, just to figure out what they need, or do they actually need the logo? Just to figure out what they want and who their target audience is, and what their business goals are. Figure out the industry.
Beautiful. Every single one of those things you just said could be like a TikTok post. What's the importance of a discovery call and figuring out a logo, right? You could sit on your phone and say, when I have a discovery call with somebody, I want to understand what they're looking to accomplish. Because if I'm going to make a logo for somebody, it has to complement the mission, the vision, the feel, the identity of a brand, right? And that itself could turn into a piece of content, right? And then you talked about like the actual designing, like, hey, when I design something, I want to think about, is this something that I want to have it be abstract? Do I want it to be geometric? Do I want it to be, like a more visual thing, or do I want it to be more typography related, right? There's so many different things. You could take those things, and you are in the past minute, we've already come up with 2 things you could post about today, right? So it's not that the content and all this other stuff in the threshold of stimulation isn't there. It's there for everybody, but it's about removing the other stuff that gets in the way, which I call distractions. Whenever somebody is refusing to take that step forward, or they don't know how to take that step forward, more often than not, they're refusing to, because you ask them, well, why haven't you done this? And they're like, oh, well, excuse number 1, excuse number 2. And I'm like, okay, so you're just not doing this because you have too many excuses to not do it. When I come across having a conversation with somebody about that specifically, it's about removing those distractions. And it's about figuring out, how do we just remove this stuff so you can just do exactly what you say you want to do? I would rather somebody lose in the marketplace on bad strategy than lose in the marketplace for not trying.
Yeah. And I think that sounds very counterintuitive, but the first step is very hardest, I can say. And the second step will be the second hardest thing. So what do you think is stopping the people Like most of times people know that they are distracting themselves with all the distraction they have around themselves.
Yeah.
So I can call this, they are sabotaging themselves. So that's there. And so what's there? Are the distraction the main cause, or is this the fear of unknown making them self-sabotage themselves with all the distraction out there?
Yeah. So good question. When it comes to distractions, a form of a distraction can be fear, right?
Mhm.
Or anxiety or stress or tiredness or the illusion of choice. Everybody has their own mix of flavors that cause distractions to pop up more frequently than others. For some people, it's the stories they tell themselves, right? And they just either tell themselves people like me aren't capable of doing this kind of stuff, or someone else is already there, the market's too saturated, or no one likes the stuff that I do, right? It could just be the stories, or someone could be hyper positive, but then they are not grounded, right? They're
Mhm.
so, everything's perfect, everything blah 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 blah, and they're so high up in the clouds that they're not grounded in reality on how to take actual steps. They're very conceptual, but they don't move in an operational fashion. And we all know people who are on both sides, people who are in their heads so much about the stories and things that just aren't true that they refuse to
Mhm.
take action. And then the people who are completely out of their heads and out of their minds, and have no sense of or grip on reality itself to be able to go and make something happen for them that's positive. And there's plenty of other stuff too, right? So it comes down to when you have a thought of this is something I would want to do, and it's the end of a day and you haven't accomplished that, or you haven't thought about it or anything like that. I would challenge people to sit with themselves and just let it come in, right? Let the darkness approach. When you let the darkness approach, the distractions in any form that they present themselves, you can start to take note of them.
Mhm.
And when you can actually understand what they are, right? If you say, I'm not good enough, I'm I'm not smart enough, I'm not creative enough, I don't have a team around me. When you can identify those things, you can do something about it,
Yeah.
right? There, and we live in a society where a lot of people will go onto social media, they will see other people's success, and they will say, massive thank you to these people who helped me put it together. Or you see somebody making content and they're like, oh, I'm going to send this over to my video editor. And you're like, oh, I don't have a video editor, I do everything myself. I mean, that's the reality of what some people see.
Mhm.
And when they set expectations that they can't do what they're doing because they don't have the same resources, you are comparing yourself to what someone has done today and not comparing yourself to their journey. So when it comes to the thing that gets in the way the most, it's when people compare their entire journey to somebody's highlight in the moment. And they're not comparing their journey to someone else's journey to understand if there are differences that have occurred, right? If you want to become a video content creator and you have maybe your favorite video content creator out there, understand their journey. Actually, don't just look at a video that they've recently posted and say, that looks great, mine sucks. No, that's not going to help you one bit. But if you say, what have I done so far? What have I put together? What's my, what are my um what are my pieces of software that I have? What are the pieces of technology that I have at my disposal? And what is this person like? How did they start? What did they start
Yeah.
doing? What was their strategy around how they did this stuff? What makes it attention grabbing? Right? This is like how advertisers think, because that's how most social media works. It's advertising. You want something attention grabbing, and then you want to deliver some type of value or a solution to a common problem or whatever the attention grabber was. So then when it comes to what gets in the way, it's when people compare themselves right now to somebody else right now, rather than compare themselves right now to the person they were yesterday. When you can just overcome the person who you were yesterday by the slightest margin, you've gotten better. It has not, because you can go, I could go onto social media right now and I could look at, maybe Gary Vee has posted 3 pieces of content today. And I'll be like, oh my gosh, I've posted 1. And I would be upset with myself. This guy's been at it for quite some time, mastering his craft. And he even says, I didn't post a single piece of content until he was 30. Right. So if you're younger than 30 and you're already posting content and other stuff like that, you're technically, in terms of your journey, you're going to be on a better trajectory than what his was. But yet people want to compare themselves at like 20 years old to someone who's in their 40s and be like, oh, why are they better than me? It's like, they've got 20 years on you. What are you talking about? Why are they better? They've been at this game longer. They've been doing this longer. They've been in the trenches figuring this stuff out for longer. And here you are at half of their age, already having access to everything that they wish they had access to. So you are living to bring it full circle. If you could look back and do something differently, sure, Gary Vee would be like, I'd start earlier. And I wish I had this technology. But then people in their early 20s don't realize somebody like Gary Vaynerchuk would probably look at them and be like, dude, if I was your age with all this technology, I would go nuts. But people are going to look at somebody else who's already doing really well, and it's going to stop them. Expectations will kill more action than anything else ever could. And that's what gets in the way the most. But I would challenge people, take time at the end of a day, when you feel like things haven't gone super well, just let it come in and just take note of it. Just actually shine some light on it. Because once you do, you can do something about it. And you could say, I want to do this differently. Right. And you can call it out, and then you can do it differently and see what happens. See if that was the big issue or not. And if you have trouble with that, work with somebody, be accountable to somebody, tell them, be transparent. We live in this world where we have to try and come off as, or people believe they have to be bulletproof. No, it couldn't be further from the truth. When you can show up and be transparent and be vulnerable, it makes the world a better place. I promise that much too.
For sure, definitely. And you were talking about comparing yourself to your past self. So most of the people talk about becoming the best version of yourself. So don't you think the best version of yourself is always a moving target and you are just chasing it there? So when do you think that like you arrived there? This is like I'm like feeling successful. I've done enough. So do you think that point arrives, or it's always going to be a North Star and you can never go there?
Yeah. I hope it never comes. Human beings have a fascination with the hunt, right? The pursuit of something. And think of it this way. You're saving up. Let's say you're a kid, young kid, you want to save up to get the newest video game console. You save up, you work hard, you do all these other things. There's motivation, there's inspiration there, and you finally get it. And then you start questioning like what you're doing. If you really like it, you start getting post-purchase dissonance. Is this exactly what I wanted? Should I have saved up for something different? It's because human beings need to be in pursuit of something. Because when we're not, you can tell. You can see when someone is not driven, not motivated, because their physical self and their mental self will reflect it. You look at somebody, when I say, and anybody who's listening, when I say this guy who I'm talking to is unmotivated, just doesn't, has no drive, doesn't really have any passions or desires, and they're just not doing much, there's probably a person who pops up in your mind. And all of us could probably sketch that person out, and that the person would look semi-similar. It's because we know the effects that not having a pursuit can do to you. It takes a toll. And then if I told you this guy wakes up driven every single day, he's got a motivation, he wants to go and accomplish something, and he knows nothing's going to get in his way, him or her, right? Going to get in their way. We could probably picture somebody who looks like that as well, and they would look totally different. So when it comes to the pursuit of our best self, there will always, I guarantee you, there won't come a day when you can't sit on your bed at the end of the night and think of something that you would want to change, right? Maybe you were a tad bit aggressive in one thing. Maybe you felt a little unmotivated with something. Maybe you're a little gluttonous here. Maybe you did there's probably one of 50 things that could pop into your head at any given time that you could choose to say, I want to be better at that. I want to level myself up in that area. I don't think you'll ever come. There's not a single person who gets to a point in life where they say, I'm perfect. There's nothing I have to work on. And the people who say that are the people who are going to be sorely left out on, because they're going to they're done. As soon as you become complacent with life, things go downhill very quickly. So when it comes to achieving your perfect self, it's not about being discontent with who you are. It's about seeing that you can continuously provide value to the people around you. And you can do that better every single day. You can provide more value to the people in the world around you by just being a version of yourself that you see as providing the most value. Now, this has nothing to say with like, people aren't perfect. I know everybody says, accept yourself for who you are. I get it, right? It's good to be able to say, hey, love yourself. But it's another thing to say, be transparent with yourself. If you see yourself as this golden deity that's perfect in every single way, like, I'm sorry, but you're delusional. But if you're a normal human being, then you will say, this is something I want to do, and I will always want to provide more value to the world around me, or I will always want to do something better. And it's not because you suck in any way, shape, or form. It has everything to do with you see yourself as a work in progress, and there's nothing wrong with that. If anything, being open about being a work in progress and being open about wanting to have a pursuit of being your best self every single day and knowing that it will always be there should be a good thing, because it will always keep that motor running inside of you and always keep you in a place where you are in the pursuit of excellence in your world, even if that excellence is just you, right? It doesn't have to be a project, doesn't have to be money, it doesn't have to be all these other things. It's amazing what happens when you do one thing different and only you know about it, right?
Yeah.
If you get up and you make your bed, you're suddenly a little bit more proud of yourself. No one else has to know about it. You don't get on a phone call and say, hey, I made my bed today, right? Everybody's going to sit there and be like, cool, man, welcome to being an adult. But for some people, it's a big step, right? Being more disciplined with yourself in the pursuit of finding things that you stand for and living with a code of ethics that you agree to and that you inherit and that you live on a daily basis. It's a beautiful pursuit.
For sure, definitely. And I think in our times, there are two messages being broadcast. One is of being competent, like discipline, hard work, and other is of self-acceptance, peace, calmness, and somehow spirituality is more leaning toward that. So what do you think is there a delicate balance like a person has to do? Like I'll have to be calm at the same time. I'll have to work on myself and be competent. So are there any ways in which these two facets meet together, or there always be conflict between hustle culture and being calm?
So I want to make sure I heard your question correctly here, because I want to answer it well. So you are saying being calm, cool, and collected in a peaceful member of society, and then being semi-aggressive in your pursuit of, success in general. And you're saying that we are being as most people are told, there's kind of like a dichotomy there. There's like a yin and yang. There's a balance there. And how do we start to address that? Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, for sure. You termed
Okay.
it quite better. Yeah.
Okay. I think you said it great. I just want to make sure I translated it into some words that I've sat with for a while. Okay. So, and I think Jordan Peterson said this really well.
Mhm.
People should be hyper motivated, and to a point of when he calls them being a monster. He would rather somebody learn how to unleash that monster within to go and conquer and be hyper successful, and then learn restraint, than be hyper restrained and have to tell yourself that it's okay for you to go and want to accomplish things. So another form of this is you'd rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war, right? Because it puts you in a position where you're always, there's an advantage to it in being, and I'll keep using the term monster here. I think of it as if you're an absolute monster when it comes to being a parent, right? Being a parent or being a husband or being a significant other, then you are a monster when it comes to loving unconditionally. You give every hug like it might be the last one you'll ever give. You will say and be transparent about everything, holding nothing back. Because you don't know if you'll ever have the chance to have that conversation again. And you will forgive people for anything because you know that life might be too short. And that's just barely touching the iceberg. And the same goes for business. If you're a monster, then you come into it understanding, if I have an idea, if I have something that I think is going to provide value, nothing's going to stop me in making that come to market. Nothing is going to stop me in creating a community of believers around this one thing. And nothing is going to stop me in putting my product or service in a position where it really does change people's worlds. And I'm going to be relentless in my pursuit of making that happen. And you think of it in the other way, if you're hyper restrained and you have to try and convince yourself that you can be a monster, you think of that in terms of relationships. If you're hyper restrained, you hold things, you keep secrets, you understand that it's not okay to be vulnerable. You don't want to be hurt. You leave things unspoken. And then you have to learn how to put things out there and learn how to become vulnerable and learn how to truly love somebody deeply, no matter who they are. You have to learn how to let things go. It's much easier to learn how to restrain yourself after you've been all out in every single thing that you do, no matter what it is. So when it comes to being calm, cool, and collected, obviously, if you're going to be playing business, if you're in the business world, there are rules to the game. You go into a boardroom, you can't go in there screaming and shouting. You have to go in there and you have to have poise. You have to carry yourself well. You have to articulate your thoughts. You have to think about everything that you want to do. And you have to make sure that you take everybody else's perspectives into account and make sure that you're touching on all the details. These are just rules of the game. Mm-hmm. But that shouldn't put you in a position where you hide the monster within. You're just learning how to play dress up with it, right? And you're learning how to harness it to be able to be hyper focused for a specific scenario in which you need it. This is not about, I mean, you're learning conscious restraint. I want restraint in people's lives to be conscious. I don't want it to be a subconscious reaction. I would rather it be something where you say, I'm going to actively restrain some of the stuff because it serves me better for this one scenario, than for someone to say, I'm showing up to a boardroom meeting with the big boys and the big wigs, and I don't know if I'm playing at their level. And then someone has to sit there and say, okay, let's go through like how you be assertive when you're in there. And let's talk about how you make sure that you are clear, you are concise, you are transparent, you're conscious about everything that you're doing. It's much easier to learn how to pull things back just a little bit and be conscious about those items. So when it comes to today's society, I don't know where people are learning it from, but obviously they are learning it. Hey, be calm, cool, collected, restrained, all this other stuff. Whoever's telling that to you is like, it's your choice to put that cage around you.
Mm-hmm.
And I would push people to say you're way more capable than you think. And it's, if you see that cage, you run, right? Or you ignore it altogether and you just be you and you just go all out, because at any time that cage will be there a little bit. But I'd rather it be one that you build for a purpose and you say, let's not go wild in this one area. So let's restrain a couple things, but I'm going to choose to do it. And then for the rest of the time, play all out.
Very interesting. And you talked about being authentic. So there's being authentic and being vulnerable on various platforms that you can go through a broadcast or talk with some people. And there is a term I call pity party. So how do you balance that? Like being authentic, is there any balance, or it just depends on person to person?
Being authentic is a very interesting concept for a lot of people, because what is authenticity? Authenticity is living life the way that you would naturally do it if like there were no rules or no boundaries. Like, what are your natural tendencies? What are the things that you enjoy that you have a strong affinity towards? But the thing is, as we grow up, we learn things from others. We learn how to love from our families. We learn how relationships work from our families. We learn how to be social from our peers. We learn how business works from business leaders. We learn from, there was this, I heard this from a friend of mine. We learn tendencies from people who are near us, who are powerful to us and are influential globally, I believe are the three categories. I'll have to look that up again, but you learn your tendencies, like your authenticity comes from all these different areas of life, and the unique combination of all these things is what makes you authentic. The things that are your puzzle pieces that you put together that make you you. So when it comes to authenticity and vulnerability and all this other stuff, it's not, if you hate vulnerability, then vulnerability is not authentic to you, right?
Yeah.
Maybe because to you being hyper vulnerable is an influential tactic, right? We see it. I don't know if you've ever watched a singing competition. Someone goes up there on stage, they sing, and then they say an incredibly vulnerable story, and the judges cry. Somebody out there is going to sit there and say, they want a pity party, right? And so therefore, to them, they may see authenticity as leaning on your skills rather than your circumstances. But for some people, they might see it opposite. They might say, that person went through a ton, and that's very vulnerable and very authentic to them. And for them, they're like, my journey is everything that has happened. Like, where I am is the culmination of everything. And I want to share some of that story with you. So it depends on the person. If you see vulnerability as being authentic, then it's going to be authentic. Now, I will say this, being vulnerable is hyper important. And transparency is like vulnerability. It's just about being honest. It means you're letting everything out there. But it's slightly different than vulnerability. Vulnerability is sharing everything, including the things that hurt, right? Showing all sides of yourself. Transparency is sticking to the facts and just laying it all out there, and everything is factual. I believe that there are people who sit on both sides of that fence. Some people love vulnerability. Some people hate vulnerability. I'd say just be transparent about it. If you don't want to be vulnerable, be transparent about it. Say, I'm not comfortable. I don't want to be vulnerable, right? Like that's something I don't feel like sharing. And that's totally fine. That can be authentic for you. And you could say, I share this kind of stuff with people who are hyper close to me or anything like that. That's totally fine. As long as you are transparent, you don't have to be vulnerable. But sometimes the road to transparency has vulnerability in it. But you can also be vulnerable without being fully transparent about your life.
Yeah.
Right. So when it comes to being an authentic person, I believe, comes from being a transparent person, living your truth, whatever is truthful to you, whatever your universal truths are, whatever your universal values are, and everything within it. Like if you've removed all politics from your life, you are being an authentic person. You're just playing all out. And for some people, that's letting the monster out of the cage, because there are some people who have a very dark side to them. And when they let that dark side out, they may feel like they're being finally authentic, right? They're restrained in so many different areas of life that they let this monster out, and people are just like, whoa, you're being this, you're being that. And they're just like, this is who I am. This is what I crave. I crave this visceral hunt for something. And that's being authentic. So when it comes to the balance between authenticity and transparency and vulnerability, I think if you're going to be authentic, you have to be transparent. Lay it out there, right? Whatever makes sense to you, put it out there. Even if what you put out there is a culmination of all these things you've learned from other people, because what's authentic to you is always going to change. As you get older, you're going to say, I really like this concept that this one person said. I'm going to take that on. But being authentic doesn't require you to be vulnerable. You choose if you want to be vulnerable or not, and you choose who you be vulnerable with. Now, vulnerability, according to Brene Brown, is an incredibly strong concept for people to be able to embrace. When you can be vulnerable, when you can let everything flow. I mean, you think of the rapper Eminem, and if you've ever seen the movie 8 Mile, you know, the big rap battle that he has at the end of the movie, he's hyper vulnerable. He puts everything that people would like, that people don't see or people would be ashamed of, or people of, you know, like he lets all of it flow. And then the guy on the other side of the microphone has nothing to work off of, because usually a rap battle, you sit there and you're making fun of other people and you're in all this other stuff. He took all of that guy's ammunition away because he was completely vulnerable, which made him Eminem in the moment, which before there was Marshall Mathers, like made him, which I'll have to check the name. I don't know if that's his last name. But when you can be hyper vulnerable, you become essentially bulletproof at that point, right? People want to be bulletproof by not sharing stuff. You become bulletproof by sharing stuff, because then you accept it, you embrace it. And then when something comes at you, you're like, yeah, I'm already aware of that. And everybody already knows that. So I'm sorry, but that doesn't affect me, right? You get to, but when if somebody digs up dirt on you, oh, I saw Ankit at the gym the other day and, you know, he was doing this, how embarrassing. right? Like you're going to sit there and you're going to be like, oh, how could I, how could somebody know that? Oh no. And then you feel exposed.
Yeah.
When you're not vulnerable, you leave yourself open to being exposed.
Mhm.
So that's a really important distinction to put out there. But anyways, bit of a tangent, but either way, being
Yeah.
authentic, be transparent, and then learn vulnerability because it's a very, very powerful tool.
Mhm. Very interesting. And I have this interesting view about this because nowadays we can see that whoever someone's ideal, maybe it can be a movie star, it can be a high achiever, businessman, sportsman, and even who can be. So people want them to be vulnerable, and it somehow humanizes them. But if someone who's just in the process and sharing something, we say that, oh, stop complaining and work on yourself. So that's something interesting I've noticed, that people want their ideal to be, I think, somehow to relate with them. They want them to vulnerable, but with their regular folks, they see that vulnerability as complaining. So there's something interesting thing I've noticed. Yeah.
Yeah, super interesting. And you look at celebrities,
Mhm.
right? Celebrities become like either they are vulnerable before becoming transparent. They suddenly become like you look at people like Will Smith
Yeah.
becomes a meme every
Mhm.
time he does something that is hyper vulnerable. I mean, no wonder the guy is not sharing much because every time he does, people make fun of him. People toss it aside, people cast it aside. And the same thing with like celebrities when they're like if they ever shed a tear or they do something, people make fun of them.
Mhm.
And it's this crazy crying shame that people I mean, it shows that people see vulnerability as this weird thing because they themselves are not comfortable with vulnerability. So what do? They try and take it and they turn it into something that's in jest. That
Yeah.
is they make fun of because they themselves are not comfortable with it. Um, but then there's a group of people who look at someone who is struggling with something and is vulnerable, and they look and they say, "Wow, what does he need to be? What do they need to be supported? What do they need in order to continue to move forward? Are they getting the help that they need? Are they getting the support that they need? Because
Mhm.
everybody needs it. It's not that there's somebody out there who's completely self-sufficient. We all need each other. It's what we're kind of designed for, is to need each
Yeah.
other. So the people who are out there being a lone wolf, all you're doing is cutting yourself off from growing. And we all need each other. We absolutely do. That's why coaches exist. That's why on-kit people like you exist, right? You're helping companies. Like they're not like a
Mhm.
company is not one person, even if it's a solopreneur, they're reliant on others. So why do we not lean into that more? Performance occurs when you tap into your fullest potential.
Yeah.
And um, I mean, the highest level of performance occurs when you tap into your fullest potential. In order to do that, you have to remove distractions. And we need other people in order to be able to remove distractions because we create those distractions ourselves. Sometimes we're not capable of removing them ourselves. Sometimes we need help from other people in order to be able to remove them. Um, and so when it comes to how people in society are with vulnerability and all this other stuff, um, it's not taught anywhere. It's not taught how to be vulnerable, how to be transparent, how to be a good, caring, kind person, how to sit with your own thoughts, how to create good plans for yourself. Like that's not taught anywhere. You have to go out and find specialty certifications and stuff into like the deep dark corners of the globe to be able to get those things,
Mhm.
because they're not easy to find. But a lot of those things can be found when we just choose to connect with other people and we just have open, honest conversations and we don't hold anything back. And you're just
Yeah.
transparent about, like, if you have a problem with something, come to the table and say, there's something going on and I want to have a conversation about it. Have the hard conversations. Your
Mhm.
life will be so much better knowing that you've had those conversations than feeling like you wish you would have.
Yeah, amazing. And I have this personal question of mine. I
Yeah.
saw your podcast and you have 100 plus episodes. So I'll be asking for some tips like how did you do it and how to be a better, I think, podcast host.
This goes back to one of the first things that we talked about.
Mhm.
So yes, I have over 100 episodes. The first 20, first 30, I listen back to, and there's a part of me that's like, oh my gosh, I was just getting started. I sounded very robotic, very structured, very formatted, and it was not enjoyable for me.
Mhm.
I'm sure it was enjoyable to some people. Um, Not enjoyable for me, because where I'm at now, I listen to that, and the only thing that comes to my mind is, man, I was just getting started. And that's what I
Yeah.
needed at that time. When I was just getting started, I needed all that structure to keep me on track, to be able to keep my thoughts
Mhm.
concise and move forward, and have everything in order and feel confident. I needed those things for that phase. And then as I grew, as I got more reps, um, I started getting rid of the scripts. And then I started getting rid of the general topics. And now I just, for the most part, I'm like, hey, let's do a podcast. And the thing is, I will sit down with somebody. And now I'm learning how to almost free flow some of these things. So I'm just starting when it comes to that phase,
Mhm.
and figuring out what's going to serve me best while I'm doing that. And so as you're growing your podcast, your platform, your social media, your anything, it doesn't matter who you are, people listening to this, or even yourself, um,
Mhm.
just realize that as you take action, you will get feedback. And the more
Yeah.
action you take, the more feedback you get. And the more feedback you get, the better decisions you can make. And then you just continue to do that cycle over and over and over. You'll learn how to ask better questions. You'll learn how to pull on the thread. You'll learn how to create content that's, you know, attention grabbing. You'll learn how to ask a provocative question in a non-provocative way, in order to get little clips
Yeah.
that are the best, right? Um, you'll learn all that stuff. Just be willing to step into that gray space and just try stuff out. Think of it
Mhm.
all as a science experiment.
For
Everything you
sure.
do, you're
Yeah.
just trying stuff out and seeing what happens and receiving feedback, and then taking that feedback, creating a new hypothesis, and just keep doing it over and over and over. That's really kind of what life is. You wake up with new
Mhm.
information, you choose what you want to do that day, and you go and do that, and you choose if you want to do the same thing or if you want to do a different thing, and you get feedback from it, and you wake up the next day and you do it all over again. And that's how we develop as people.
Yeah. Amazing. Keegan, wow, what a wonderful conversation. I really loved every bit of you and the stories it was, wow, really amazing. So please let us know like where we can find you and how to reach out to you.
Yeah, 100%. So a couple of things. One, um, you can go to my website, lamarcoaching.com, LAMAR coaching, COACHING.com. And that's where you can find a lot of information about me and my practice and all this other stuff. Also in hand, and I know this is not great for a podcast platform, but in my hand right now is a book called Forever Athlete, which right here is a picture of yours truly as one of the authors of it. You can go to my website and you can pick up this book on there. Every author who is listed on the book, there's 18 people who have shared life stories from them being either collegiate or professional athletes, sharing stories, tips, tools, lessons, and all these other things that they've carried with them from the sporting world over into the real world, business world, or otherwise, that have served them. And so don't just take this stuff from me, take it from all these other people. I think last week we became bestsellers in I think 5 or 6 different categories on Amazon.
Amazing.
But every author has their own special link to be able to purchase the book. So what I would say is go to lamarcoaching.com and go to just shop on there. It's the only place that I have the book listed for myself. And Ankit, I'll make sure that you have that link as well, just in case you want to share it out.
Yeah.
You can also go to Instagram, which is at Lamar Coaching, and I'm also on TikTok at Lamar Coaching. And a lot of those places also have like a link in the bio where you can come and figure some stuff out about work that I do. I do offer a free coaching session for everybody. Anybody who is curious about what it's like to work with a coach, or what that would even like if you've never worked with one, or if you've worked with one before and you want to see what it's like to work with a performance mindset coach who is a little bit more on the, I'll say on a little bit more on the assertive side, right? I'm going to push you to do stuff. And the people who I work with have been amazing. They push themselves pretty hard. And they get a lot of great results. Now, sometimes you push yourself and you don't get great results, but the thing is you get feedback, and then you can go and change what you do. And then you can go and get great results. But I push people to take action and get that feedback so that they can then make better decisions, and get better results, just naturally. So if you're curious about that, you can go ahead and check out my website, or check out any of my social media. On Instagram, I know I have a link in my bio where you can literally just click on it and create a schedule or schedule a session with me right there and then. You can also find me on LinkedIn at Keegan Lamar. But outside of all that stuff, I'm just here to help, right? That's why I do podcasts and all this other stuff, is I just want to throw it all out there and help people out. And I promise you, if you take any of the stuff that I talked about today and you implement it into your life, you will get feedback, and you will be able to make changes, and you will be able to get better results in everything that you do. But I mean, Ankit, you did an amazing job kind of taking through this journey and making sure that I don't drive this off the rails.
I really enjoyed it, every bit of it. And all the links will be in the description. So yeah, thanks again.